Thank you. So, it's my pleasure to be here today and to present to you Klaria Pharma. So, the first few slides here are about what are we doing and what sort of motivates us and what are we trying to achieve. So, the current situation is that in many indications, in many diseases, these are treated either with injections or nasal sprays. So these are drugs that are already there, they're already on the market, but they are administered as an injection or a nasal spray. And in the areas where we're focusing, this presents problems, unmet medical needs, if you will. And these problems then lead to either that these diseases, these medical states that these patients are in, that they are treated poorly, or in some cases, and we have a couple of these projects, it can even lead to death. This is kind of the overarching thing, that we're trying to do. We're trying to really help patients by developing new formulations for pharmaceuticals, for drugs that are currently administered as nasal sprays or as injections, and where this presents an issue. So what do we want to do? We want to remove these patient burdens. And in so doing, improve treatment outcomes. And we're doing this by replacing injections and nasal sprays with a very small, very easy to use, and reliable in terms of how it acts in the body and how it delivers drugs into the body. A very reliable product, which is the Klaria alginate film. And what are some of these areas where we can make a difference? So, for example, acute emergencies, such as anaphylactic shock, which is if you're allergic to bees or peanuts, and you happen to be stung by a bee or eat a peanut and you start to swell up. Well, today there's a treatment, which is an auto-injector pen. You inject adrenaline, and this takes down the swelling and prevents you from actually choking to death, because that's what happens. The tissues around the neck swell up, and primarily children, but also adults, choke to death. Well, here, instead of having to carry a pen around, we can actually create in our thin little film the same product, which is vastly easier to use, vastly easier to have with you, and in so doing, then, create a better product. We also look at epileptic seizures. Epileptic seizures, if poorly treated, which with current products they can lead to, obviously lead to, severe negative impact on the quality of life of these, again, primarily children, but also adults. You can have an epileptic seizure at any time, and if you do have epileptic seizures, and if you have repeated epileptic seizures, it can lead to brain damage, which is, not what you want in children or in adults. And finally, also migraines. Again, migraine is not a headache. Migraine is a severely debilitating disease, which has very serious consequences for the people that suffer from migraine. And current treatment options, we're focused on the nasal sprays and the injections, are not meeting sort of the requirements of these patients. And we believe that with our film, we can solve a lot of these problems and help these people live better lives and avoid serious consequences, such as, for example, depression. Okay, so that's what we want to do. How do we want to do this? Well, we have a film. It's a small film. It's the size of a stamp, a small stamp. In this film, when we make the film, we put the active pharmaceutical ingredient into the film. And then you put the film, you put it into your cheek, on the inside of your cheek, and when you do that, it sticks. And then it sticks, and then it sits there. And then it sits there for 5 or 10 minutes. We can engineer how long it sits. And during this time, the active ingredient that we've loaded in the film transfers from the film across the mucosa and into the blood. So what does not happen is that it goes into the stomach, right? So you put it in your mouth, but it doesn't go into the stomach, it goes into the blood. So this is the same idea as an injection or as a nasal spray. But in all the areas where we've chosen, this is a superior way of doing it. And so, we compare ourselves to nasal sprays and injections. There are other companies, there are a couple in Sweden and there are other companies elsewhere in the world that claim to do the same thing. They say, we have an oil and you spray this oil in some little pocket somewhere and then it's transmucosal. Or we have a film, a rapidly dissolving film that you're supposed to put under your tongue. Well, sure, there's going to be a small fraction of the active ingredient that goes transmucosally, but with all of these other products, what happens is they melt, they mix immediately, more or less, they mix with the saliva and you swallow it. I mean, that's just human nature. If you have some saliva in your mouth, you swallow it. So all these other so-called transmucosal drugs really only work with drugs that are also taken up if they go into the stomach, whereas we're focused, not in all our programs, but in most of our programs, we're focused on drugs that if they actually go down into the stomach, they don't work, like ketamine or like adrenaline, epinephrine. So our pipeline, again, sort of put into a grid where we try to explain how we have chosen, how we have come to this pipeline. We ask ourselves really two questions. First of all, is the drug today administered as a nasal spray or as an injection? If the answer to that is yes, you move into the one area, and then you ask yourself, well, is this a problem? Because sometimes it's not a problem. But in many cases, it is a problem. So if the answer to both of those questions is yes, this is where we want to spend our time. Of the hundreds of possible molecules that we can put into our film, we choose the ones where we are creating the most value, where we're solving the biggest problems for the patients. And we're working with old molecules, right? So these are not, in order for us to create value, and in order for us to obviously claim value, we have to solve problems. We can't just have something that's, it's a little easier to take, or it takes 10 minutes instead of 15 minutes for it to go into the blood. I mean, that's today. 20 years ago, you could do that. Today, you can't do that. Today, you have to really look at, are we really solving problems? Are we saving lives? Or, really, really improving people's quality of life? And that's what we're trying to do. All right. So what is the commercial potential of these programs that I just mentioned? I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time today talking about exactly how all of these things work. I've tried to explain, we're replacing these injections. We have identified these programs as being the ones where doing this creates the most value. If you're interested in learning more about that, I encourage you to either call me, look at our homepage, or look at some other presentations that I make, which are 1 hour rather than 20 minutes. But let's now focus on the commercial potential. Why should you, as investors, be interested in what we're doing? So our lead program is sumatriptan alginate film. Sumatriptan alginate film is a migraine treatment. We have completed the pivotal bioequivalence study. Pivotal means this is what you need to do to be able to file for approval. Okay, so we have completed the pivotal bioequivalence study. It was successful. We compared both against the comparative product in the United States and in Europe. Based on this study, which we reported last year, we are now able, and we're going to, file for approval. So we're going to file for approval in early summer next year. There's some manufacturing and stability things we still need to do, but there's very little risk between now and then in terms of any kind of operations or anything. What we had to do, we've done. So now in early summer next year, we're going to file. These applications typically take about a year. So in 2023, springtime, we will have our first approved product in Europe. We project the sales in Europe to be somewhere in the neighborhood between 80 and 100 million euros in peak sales potential. We typically takes about 5 years to get there. So about 100 million euros in peak sales potential in Europe for adults, and an equivalent number for children. So overall, this is a 150 to 200 million euro market opportunity for our product, which is going to be filed for approval next year in Europe. The market in the United States is bigger, and the reason is because the prices in the United States are bigger. It's about the same number of patients. We are looking very carefully at the child market here. There are no approved drugs for the treatment of migraine in children under 12, period. There's nothing. Sumatriptan is used sometimes, and otherwise it's Tylenol, paracetamol, right? Alvedon, as we say in Swedish. And that's it. So, you know, there's nothing approved. We are now looking very carefully at what we would need to do to get our formulation of sumatriptan approved in the pediatric market. And we're also looking very, very carefully at all the clinical trials that have been done to date, and we're trying to understand, and I think we're very close to understanding, what were the mistakes in terms of design and in terms of how these children were treated that led to these trials not being successful. And if we can convince ourselves, and I think we're almost there, that we in fact have a better plan where we can actually show that our product works in children, then we're going to go for that. And because in addition to, you know, clinical trial design, there are many specific benefits of a film for this pediatric population as compared to an auto-injector pen or a nasal spray. So sort of the trial that we've done right now addresses and qualifies us for the adult market in both the United States and Europe. And if we want to do this pediatric market, we're going to have to do more trials. But again, that's a decision that we're currently working on. This is wholly owned by Klaria worldwide. And as I think a very interesting benchmark or comparable that we can think about, there's a company called Upsher Smith. Upsher Smith is based in the United States. They're basically a branded generics company. They acquired about a year and a half ago a product from Dr. Reddy's, which was a sort of better nasal spray and a better auto-injector pen. So it was nothing new. It was better than what's already on the market. And these things were at about the stage where we are now. A little bit further along. They're about a year away from approval. And Upsher Smith paid $70 million up front for these two products. An additional $40 million in near-term milestones, meaning in the next sort of year or so. And they're paying a royalty. Now, I'm not guaranteeing that we're going to get $70 million up front for our film. I would love that, but, you know, time will tell. But the point I'm trying to make here is that, you know, that's a lot of money to pay for two products which are basically the same. That's what's already there. And the people at Upsher Smith are not stupid. So obviously, they have made a lot of calculations where they looked at this and they said, look, there's still a lot of unmet medical need here. This is a marginal improvement over what's there, and we think that's worth quite a lot of money. We're now coming with a completely new formulation, which has unique, specific advantages. So we are quite sort of hopeful that we're going to be able to carve out a very nice business for ourselves, and that we're going to help to solve a lot of problems for migraine patients, both in Europe and the United States, and possibly for children as well. So that's sumatriptan. If we go on, talk about epinephrine or adrenaline, that is today a product which is given as an auto-injector pen. And the consequence of that is that nobody likes to give an injector pen, you know, into the thigh of themselves or of their 7-year-old kid. So what happens? You use it too late. That's what happens. And that makes a hard-to-treat condition even harder to treat. So imagine the difference is, oh, did Kalle just eat a peanut? You know, I don't know. Here, just put in a film. Done. Right? As opposed to waiting. Wait, is he swelling up? Etc. It's such a lower hurdle. And this is addressing the biggest unmet medical need, which is being treated too late. This is a $2 billion market. And we think our product is clearly superior. Here, we can launch this, we think, in 2025. The last one I'll talk about is naloxone. Naloxone is a treatment for opioid overdose. There are an incredible number of prescriptions for opioids given every year in the United States, and unfortunately, a significant portion of these prescriptions are misused and abused, and this leads to overdoses. Now, everyone has been talking in the United States about so-called co-prescription, meaning together with the opioid, you want to give the antidote, the treatment for the overdose. Just because there's so many people dying from this that, you know, forget about moral arguments or whatever, let's just try to save some lives. That's what people, the problem here is, it's a big nasal spray. It comes in a 2-pack, it's big like as a shoebox. So are you gonna give these things to people when they get their opioid? They put the opioid in their pocket, you know, walk away with their shoebox. If that thing makes it home, it's gonna disappear in a drawer somewhere. That's not a co-prescription. Compare that to our film. You can put our film in a little sticky little foil, just glue it right onto the box. Wherever that box goes, or that pill bottle goes, even if, as often does happen, it's sold to someone else, that it's a true co-prescription. It's following it around. We think this could be a $1 to $2 billion opportunity as well. And again, we think we could launch this in 2025, both in Europe and the United States. So I will move on because, as always, time flies. We have a very strong patent estate protecting both the technology itself and the individual films. And I think probably very importantly, we have a very good team. And this team is a very experienced team which has competence in clinical development, in preclinical development, in chemistry, and in business. And we've built this team now over the last couple of years, and I'm very confident that this team is actually going to be able to execute and achieve, you know, these very significant plans that we have. So that's, then I constantly get asked this, so I decided to make a slide about this. What's going to happen in the next 12 months? Well, this is what's going to happen. Already this year, we will present our new R&D strategy, which will also look at exactly what we need to do to register sumatriptan in the United States, and also other clinical studies that we are thinking about. We're also going to do some uppdragsanalys, some investment analysis from some Swedish healthcare-focused investment banks to give all of you investors the tools to really understand our company. We don't have that currently. In 2022, we're going to go from being a 1 clinical stage asset company to having 2, maybe 3, but for sure 2 more programs report clinical data, both adrenaline and naloxone. So we're going to go from being, you know, a 1 clinical stage asset company to 3, or possibly 2 if one of them fail, but we hope 3. We're also going to importantly file for approval, as I mentioned, of sumatriptan, which means then we've done everything we need to do, and we're a year away from approval. That's going to happen next year. We're also going to secure a commercial partner to help us market sumatriptan in Europe. And as a consequence of the new R&D strategy that we're about to present, we will also be initiating additional clinical trials for sumatriptan. So it's a lot of stuff going on next year. There will be many opportunities for us being a publicly traded company to communicate these things. And we, of course, hope and expect that that will also reflect itself in a reevaluation of the company from a market cap point of view. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open for any questions if you have any. Yep.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Jesper.
you.
We have time for one question, and I'd like to look a little bit further ahead. Where do you think you will be in 5 years?
I think we'll be a company with a number of products on the market, and additional products in development, and we'll be generating, significant cash flow from those products on the market.
And which segment where are your strongest hopes? Is it from Migraine?
That just follows the maturity of our program. So the first one to the market will be the Migraine. Following that will be these two things that I spent time on today, naloxone for opioid overdose, and adrenaline, epinephrine for anaphylactic shock. And as we've talked about, both of those are sort of billion-dollar market opportunities.
Well, thank you very much, and best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.